Lori, this is Mike Hickson with GBN. We're glad that you're a part of our program today.
What happened to the people who died before Christ died? Did they go to hell without having their sins covered by the blood of Christ?
Is it wrong to take communion more than once on the first day of the week?
Why is it okay?
Or can you
Is
take
there
it
a
with your
scriptural
brothers and
pattern
sisters during
for the
morning service,
removal
and
of
also take it again with brothers and sisters?
Is it ever right to use man-made
Is an
images
open
of Christ
public
on the
apology
bulletins
to
and
one
class
person in
materials?
front of the church
How about a
biblical?
ceramic figure of Christ?
Hello and welcome to GBN Live. We're so thrilled that you've joined us tonight for the program. Hopefully next week Mike Hickson will be back in the guest host chair. He'll be in the hosting chair again hopefully next week. It's been a privilege to guest for him, but we do hope he's better. And speaking of our guest tonight, Matthew Jones is with us tonight on the program. Matthew is the Associate Minister at the Forest Hill Church of Christ. Matt, we're always glad to have you. Glad to have you with us tonight. And then Mark Teske is with us. Of course, he's the Director of Operations here at the Gospel Broadcasting Network and also a gospel preacher. And we appreciate you, Mark, very much for your work.
Always a pleasure, BJ.
Yes, sir. Well, we're discussing tonight a very vital and controversial subject. It is the matter of the Christian and his entertainment choices. Is it all right for a Christian to seek entertainment? And if so, are there regulations as to just what entertainment he should seek or she should seek? What is the biblical rule of thumb on this? And I think to begin, maybe we need to start here. Is it right for a Christian to spend any time at all in seeking entertainment, even if it's wholesome? Some would argue, Mark, that, well, if this takes you away from studying the Bible or from spending time in prayer, it's probably not the best thing for you to do, even if it's wholesome. Should we go that far and suggest that a Christian never has any right to seek any entertainment of any kind?
And BJ, it's a very interesting subject. And if you think about it, when the Lord set up his 10 commandments back for the people of Israel, he set aside one day a week, the Sabbath day, Saturday, that they were to do no work. It was a day to be focused on things other than the work that they did other parts of the day. In addition, we see Jesus on time, for instance, in Matthew chapter 14, where he goes to the mountain to spend time by himself, to recharge himself. And with those two examples in mind, we see in Scripture that, yes, indeed, entertainment was something that was engaged in.
That rest and relaxation can make a difference. Jesus said in Mark 6 to the apostles, come apart and rest for a while. And so we're not suggesting in the program tonight that it would always be wrong for a Christian to spend time doing something that's not particularly, specifically religious. But as one seeks entertainment, they certainly need to keep those principles in mind. Matt, let me ask you about this. Is it possible that one man says, well, you shouldn't do this for entertainment, but this man has his own brand of entertainment, that he'll spend 2 hours maybe in his workshop doing something that's not reading the Bible or studying the Bible, but he'll say, if you're watching a movie, even if it's a wholesome one, that's a waste of 2 hours. And so do people have their own forms of entertainment sometime?
I think that's regularly the case in a lot of areas of discussion. It's always easier for us to see what we think is maybe the problem with someone else. I guess looking at others and judging how they ought to be doing things is a whole lot easier than introspection and saying, okay, so yes, I think there is maybe some dishonesty there sometimes in our reasoning based upon is this going to affect something I like? Don't go to the movies ever, but I'll spend my time in my workshop, right, doing things in there. So yeah, I think that could come into play, and we have to be honest with ourselves. We need to be consistent with the reasoning we're going to use.
We all have our hobbies. I remember someone called me years ago wanting to come to the school to be a student, and I said, why do you want to come to the School of Preaching? And this person said to me, I want to be a mentor to the other students to help them use their time wisely. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, for example, if they're spending time watching frivolous things on television, I want to help them avoid that. And I said, like what would be frivolous? He said, well, sports, for example. And I said, well, do you know what I'm doing right now? It's Saturday when he called. I said, I'm watching a college football game and I'm enjoying every minute of it. I've worked hard this week. I've had a hard week and I'm just enjoying kicking back in my chair and watching this, and I don't think I'm doing anything unspiritual. So that wasn't his cup of tea. And I asked him, I said, do you have any hobbies? And he said that he did. And I said, do you ever spend any time doing those hobbies? And he said that he did. And so I was trying to point out to him in a nice way, look, your cup of entertainment may not be football or some other form, but you are entertained by such and such. And as long as it's wholesome, we shouldn't start judging other people for pursuing entertainment that we might not be particularly enamored with, but that would still be within the realm of scriptural authority. Would you agree with that, Mark?
Absolutely, absolutely. And case in point, with Matt's girls, if they come over to our house and spend some time, to me that is great entertainment, and that is relaxing, and recharges me, and I enjoy that.
Right.
You know, when you're the mama to those to those girls and having to care for them all the time, that doesn't seem like recreation to you, but in my role, that's great recreation.
Yes, sir.
So there's a personal aspect to it in different circumstances that entertainment really can be something that's very widely defined.
Mm-hmm. BJ, could I also point out though?
Yeah.
The flip side of that is, just because a person doesn't enjoy a particular area of entertainment, that also doesn't mean that when I enjoy it, I don't have to listen to them. I mean, an example of that is, for instance, I have never enjoyed, in my entire Christianity, rap music. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean, at the same time, that I cannot comment to someone, a young person, who is caught up in rap music.
Right.
It's also not a defense from their side to say, well, you're just saying that because you don't like rap music.
Right.
Well, it goes both ways. I need to be honest, and if I'm going to speak to them about that, but it also doesn't mean, well, you don't like movies, so you can't tell me not to go see bad movies.
Right, and that's why we qualify with the word wholesome entertainment, because if your brand of wholesome entertainment is not mine, it's still okay. But if it's raunchy or filthy in any way, then that's a showstopper right there from the get-go. And you know, we have a caller on the line right now. Scott Ellis is a deacon at the Howe Church of Christ in Howe, Texas, and a co-publisher of the Faithful Woman newsletter. Has been a missionary to Ghana and West Africa. And we want to talk to you right now, Brother Ellis. Are you there? Scott Ellis, are you there? Brother Ellis, do we have you?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Glad to have you on the program tonight. Thanks for calling.
Good to be here.
Hey, we've been talking about how entertainment is not inherently wrong, but as you look at the United States of America, and we're Christians and we're members of the United States for the most part, is it possible, if we're not careful, for television and entertainment to become our God?
Oh, very much so. I think one of the biggest problems that we have, probably in American society, is that we get stuck in our desires to please ourselves, and oftentimes that turns to TV. We get to making sure we're at a show, or we make sure we get to a certain time, and very much so. It's very much so that the TV has become a god in the United States.
Right, and people are sometimes more interested in getting to the movie on time than they are into getting the services on time. They don't want to miss a preview. They don't want to miss the beginning of the show, but they can saunter into services anytime they want to. That kind of shows that where your treasure is, there will your heart be also emphasis, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing that oftentimes we think that entertainment, or that we think that TV is for us, when really the truth of the matter is that those guys all make their profit and everything off of advertisements. They all make it from companies trying to sell us a product through whatever means they can.
Right. Well, okay, if we don't watch as much television, what can we do with our time that would be even more eternally productive?
Well, sure. Well, as I was talking to Mark earlier, I was telling him that, we cut out TV in 2001. I mean, we cut out cable. Let me apologize about that. We have one TV in our house. We watch movies on it, and we have, iPads, laptops, everything else. We all have access to the internet, but we spend the bulk of our time, instead of, being glued to a television, we spend it in fellowship with brethren. And you would be amazed how entertaining that can be sometimes.
Yes, sir. And those are memories that will last forevermore, aren't they?
Sure, absolutely.
I think about some of the brethren I've known. I've spent time in their houses. I know Mark and Matt as preachers could attest to the fact that when you are spending time with your brethren and you leave, those memories stay with you forever, don't they?
They sure do. And I tell you, something else we've noticed over the years is we'll have people over and they'll get here, for supper or whatever, and they won't leave until 11, 12 o'clock sometimes.
Right.
And then we'll look down and go, "Wow, do you realize it's 11 o'clock already?" It's,
Yes, that's right. Well, stay on the line with us. Mark and Matt are both here, and I'm sure they'd like to interact with us in this discussion as well. Mark?
Absolutely.
One of the things you mentioned there, Scott, seems to be that you're kind of advocating a sense of balance when it comes to our entertainment choices.
Oh, very much so. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Matthew, you have anything on your mind?
Well, I just think it's encouraging to hear Scott say those things, and obviously I've got a very young family right now, and to hear kind of what they've done. Now, I think that sometimes you'd almost look at cutting off cable as like cutting off a lifeline. Well, what will we do? Mm-hmm. And you hear the jokes. I think Jeff Foxworthy's talked about how a family nearly starved to death because the cable went out, and they couldn't eat because the TV. How do you eat without the TV being on?
How do you eat without the
So
TV on?
Scott saying that's encouraging, and that's a great idea, and maybe a good challenge especially for maybe young parents like myself, who got young children, to maybe make better use of some of that time that the TV would be on.
Right.
Sure,
Absolutely.
I think the key for us, when we first realized that this is something we needed to cut out, like I said, we cut it out in 01, but you could still get rabbit ears, and we could turn on, cartoons or whatever. But I guess the thing that got us wasn't so much the language, because, on public air broadcasting, that's pretty well cut out. It wasn't so much the nudity. It was that the fathers in the households are just idiots. I mean, they portray them just as incompetent as,
right.
just this guy that's here. And I have 3 daughters too. And, when my youngest is watching that and then looking up to me, well, then, we need to get a balanced picture on what a father's supposed to be. So.
Before we let you go, let me ask you this question. Have you seen some tangible changes in your children since the television watching has been
absolutely.
reduced?
There were changes that we didn't even imagine would expect. The whining kid syndrome, where it's, I want this, I want that, I want this. Well, when the rabbit ears, when the FCC finally shut off the rabbit ears completely, so did that. Our kids, I mean, it sounds funny to say they didn't even know what was available, but I mean, they went to the store, they saw things, but it wasn't typed into them in such a way that they thought they had to have it. Their lives changed because now they start looking at the things that they want without someone else telling them what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that was the biggest change that we noticed without even expecting it. So.
Well, that's some very good advice, and I don't think it's one that anyone would ever regret. I don't think anybody on their deathbed is thinking, I wish I'd watched more television while I was alive, because on our deathbeds, the things that will be most priceless to us, I think you would agree, would be those relationships we formed.
Sure. Well, I especially say no one would say, I wish I watched more commercials, and they're just putting more and more of them on and everything. So.
That's right. Well, thank you very much for calling, Scott. We appreciate the call very much.
Thank y'all.
Yes, sir. We actually have another caller on the line. He's called in to GBN at our 662-874-5508 number. It's Brian from Fort Worth, Texas. Brian, welcome to the program.
Good evening. How are you gentlemen tonight?
We're doing well. What's your comment tonight?
I wanted to say hello to Mark to begin with. Surprised him that I called, but I had a question that one that I've always kind of struggled with a little. We talked about the devices that are out there and Christians watching shows that they shouldn't be. And one of the questions that's always been on my mind is, we have the devices such as Clear Play and those different devices, but and they're probably good devices in a way to protect yourself about things that you don't know. But when we use them to support an industry for watching shows that we shouldn't be watching to begin with, even though those devices are cutting out information that we shouldn't be watching, we're still supporting that industry and supporting those films by participating in that. You know, even though we're trying to protect ourselves, you know, should a Christian be even partaking in that show or that video to begin with? You know, even though they're trying to protect their family or their themselves, should we be at all supporting that industry that's supporting that type of movie?
Okay. Mark, why don't you explain for our viewers who may not know, first of all, what ClearPlay is, how it operates, and then if you will, feel free to address some of his concerns that he's just expressed.
Certainly will. Thanks for the call, Brian. And as we talk about ClearPlay and devices like that, what those devices do is they filter out portions of the video that you're watching that have the problems, the profanity, the nudity, the excessive violence, things such as that, and you can adjust it based upon your personal viewing standards. And that's in and of itself, you know, it shields the family from having to deal with that.
As I understand it, it will skip over sex scenes altogether. Nudity is cut out completely, and the language is not heard as far as the offensive, profane language. That's all completely eliminated from the production, if I understand correctly, right?
And honestly, you know, my family's actually worn out 3 of those devices over the years.
Right.
And nothing against the devices, we just tend to use them quite a bit. And I found that the filtering on them tends to be more suitable to my personal preferences than the editing you would get even on broadcast television.
Right.
They do a really good job there. The point that Brian brought up, though, is a good one. You know, are we supporting this industry? And I think it's something that should give everybody some pause.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, in a way we are, you know, as we're purchasing that DVD. You know, it sends a message to Hollywood and to that side. At the same time, when you see, you know, the fact that I just checked it before we came on the air, and ClearPlay is actually back ordered. They've had so much demand for their devices, they can't make them fast enough.
Right.
That people are indeed voting with the devices that they choose. Which I think is a very positive thing.
Right.
And also, when you look at the ratings of movies, the things that people are actually watching, the things that are drawing the greatest box office crowds, it's by far not the R-rated movies. It's basically the lower the rating it is, PG typically being the sweet spot. Those are the movies that gross the most. And that's where the real money is to be made for that.
So we're grateful that a device like ClearPlay is available, and more grateful that people would say, I don't want this filth coming into my home. I don't want to hear the language. It's not wrong to want to be entertained by a storyline, a plot, but I don't want it to be sullied by all of this filth. And I guess the challenge, guys, here would be to be consistent, because if you download one song from an artist that you like that may have sung another song that's not a good song, you know, are you supporting them by purchasing a song that is pure and wholesome and clean? Are you necessarily, and you know, it becomes a struggle, because when you go to the grocery store and you think about certain people that may own the store and whether you're promoting their lifestyle or not, which you may or may not know what it is, it can become an issue. A Christian's obviously always concerned about it, Matt. What are some guidelines that you try to help young people with as you work with them about these kinds of choices?
Well, one thing is, just a quick reference to a biblical concept of Paul is talking about the meat offered to idols. And you go and you purchase this meat. And at some point down the line, this man, probably the man who's selling it to you, is, number one, a pagan and supports this paganistic practice from which the meat came. And Paul says, you know, if he doesn't make it an issue with you, in other words, it's not sinful to purchase that meat at that market. Does that mean I can just go ahead and with my money support anything that's false? No. And I guess in my thinking, one of the questions I want to ask, say I have a ClearPlay and I want to watch a movie on ClearPlay. I think the caller brought up a really good point. And maybe the question I ask is this: does this movie have an agenda? And do I want to put my money toward that agenda? Not every movie that has things that I don't want to involve in my mind is necessarily made by, we understand Christians aren't making these movies, okay? Even the ones that are religious, it's not New Testament Christians making these. So I may want to take like a movie like Fireproof, and I want that in my mind. I understand New Testament Christians didn't make that. So I think it comes down to, what are they doing with this? A movie that I didn't know anything about it, I heard about it coming out, it was when I was much younger, was Talladega Nights. And I remember thinking, oh, I bet that's going to be funny. And I was listening to talk radio before it came out, and they played the interview from Will Ferrell, where they asked him, hey, in the movie, you make fun of Jesus, you make fun of this, you make fun of, why are you doing this? And he said, I want to undermine Christianity and the Bible Belt. Now, I personally am not going to pay any money ever for material put out by Will Ferrell, and that made me rethink, where am I going to put my money? When I know you've got an agenda that is opposite what I'm thinking, I think maybe that's an area of question. What is this glorifying? What is this propping up? What is it trying to either desensitize me to or persuade me toward? I don't want to help fund you to persuade this country toward negative things. At the same time, I understand a movie that maybe has a positive message isn't by Christians.
Right. Well, those are excellent comments and thoughts, and we, certainly on some of these matters, we would never encourage anyone to violate their conscience on any of these matters, and to watch a movie on Clear Play if that violates your conscience, if you feel like doing that is promoting a certain industry that's opposite of Christianity. Certainly we would never encourage that. We do have another caller on the line. We're glad to have Rick Popejoy with us. He's the preacher at the 5th and Main Church of Christ in San Angelo, Texas. Has a weekday radio program called Reflections, and you can hear it on the Gospel Radio Network every day, thegospelradionetwork.org. That's 11:30 a.m. Central Standard Time. Rick, we're always glad to have you on the program. Thank you very much for being with us.
Well, gentlemen, listen, I appreciate the work y'all do at GBN, and especially the topic for tonight of our entertainment choices and how important that is for Christians to make good ones.
Right. Well, talk about the influence that we have on others as they watch us make these entertainment choices. Does that have an effect on our influence over them and our ability to reach them with the gospel?
You know, it's interesting. I don't know how it could not have. Everything we do has an influence, whether it be in regards to our reputation or our character. And so we're influencing one way or another, either good or bad. And for example, if I choose to go to, I've seen a lot of Christians advertise this on Facebook, for example, that they're going to go watch the new American Sniper movie. And I posted on one of them, I said, you realize that there are over 200 curse words in this, and 115 of the what even the world would consider the really bad ones at the top. I mean, 115. You look up some of these movies, and they are horrendous. And that doesn't even include what you and I consider the ones that entertain the name of God and deity to be the worst ones. But now, if I'm sitting there and I've taken somebody that's not a Christian, I'm going to invite him to church after the movie, and he's watched me go through 115 curse words, maybe even a nudity scene or two, and then I'm going to invite him to church. What kind of church does he think I go to?
Well, that's a good question, and I think about, you know, we've come a long way since the days of Frankly, My Dear, and you know the rest with Gone with the Wind. That was a shocking moment in movie history at the time, and yet now it would be considered exceedingly mild, which just shows that we've gone on a slippery slope. And once you get on that slippery slope, it's so easy to just let corrupt communication proceed out of, you know, I know the Bible says don't let corrupt communication proceed out of my mouth, Ephesians 4:29, but is there something to be said about listening to it proceed out of other people's mouths?
Well, it certainly tells you about what I'm willing to entertain in my mind, right? And when I'm using my ears, those ears are connected to something. They're connected to a mind in there, and garbage in, garbage out is the old computer analogy, right?
That's right. Mark, as we talk with Rick about this, I'm thinking of that statement that the Bible says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he, from Proverbs 23. And what are some other thoughts that you think we should be thinking about as it relates to our entertainment choices and the effect they have on others?
Kind of an interesting situation. Several years ago, we were members at a congregation, and so many people there used the ClearPlay. We were just talking about that, and nearly everybody did. And so when we would talk about movies with each other, we would all understand and fully appreciate the fact that the only way we would ever watch that movie would be on the ClearPlay device.
Right.
And as long as it was just us, we could have conversations. We didn't have to put the caveat, well, we only watch this on ClearPlay. But when somebody else enters the conversation who may not know that everybody here uses that device, some of the looks, like, oh, you would watch that movie?
Right.
And immediately right there, as a Christian, that tells me my influence is being hurt.
That's right. It's a preacher. There shouldn't be any different rules for the preacher than there are for the members of the church, but I know some folks would never dream of calling up their elders or the preacher and inviting them to go see American Sniper with them, but they would say to a fellow church member, we're going to go, do you want to go Friday night and see that movie? Matt, talk about as Brother Rick is on the line with us here, talk about the consistency or lack of consistency of thinking that I can't take the preacher to it or the elders, but I could take some of my members, some of my friends who are members.
Well, that's something that comes from this concept, and it was a strange concept to me, not growing up in the church. I remember the first time I ever preached somewhere. I was young in the faith. I hadn't been a Christian very long, and I remember the first time I walked into a fellowship hall at that building, and some members were standing around talking about something. To this day, I have no clue what they're talking about, but they looked at me and quickly got quiet. And I'll never forget that feeling. Yeah. Because here I was 20 years their junior. I'm this young man. I'm this college kid, and I from that moment on I realized they're looking at me in the way that they view a Christian. And so if I will, that's not a healthy thing, but it does maybe help me think about something. If I wouldn't do this with an elder, I respect elders. If I wouldn't do this as a preacher because I respect my preacher, that needs to tell me something about where I am, because I shouldn't be holding the preacher to a different standard than what I hold myself. I mean, if a Christian should do it, then a preacher and I should do it. If a Christian shouldn't do it, the preacher, the elder, and I shouldn't do it.
Right.
And so there is inconsistency there, and it speaks to a couple of things. But ultimately, I think it comes down to what you're saying: consistency. Right. This is about the Scriptures. And certainly there are certain things elders do that other Christians don't do, and there are certain things preachers do that maybe other Christians don't do. But when it comes to my moral conduct in life and my influence, there can't be grades of how much I protect my influence. I need to be a Christian, and I need to protect that Christian influence.
Amen. Rick, how many years have you been preaching the gospel now?
30 years.
All right. In that time, I'm sure you've had to deal with this issue for all of that time, and yet our culture's changed. It's certainly spiraling downward in many ways from what it was just a few decades ago, even though it was still fraught with problems then. What principles have you tried to keep steadfast throughout all of your years of preaching on this issue?
One of them is in relationship to 1 Timothy chapter 4, where Paul tells Timothy, don't let your youth be despised, but be thou an example of the believers. And then he gives those 6 wonderful principles in which we are to be an example. And if I'm an example to the believers in these things, I'll also be an example to the world in these things. And in word is one of those, but the next one is in conversation or my manner of life and purity. And I need to have that sense of recognizing that no matter where I go or what I do, I'm going to have influence on somebody somewhere. And I like what was just stated when y'all were talking about, some people view the preacher differently, and they don't see the preacher in the same light. Well, Matthew 5 is not addressed to preachers.
Right.
It's addressed to Christians, and we are to be the salt and light of the world, and you can't be the salt and the light. And, BJ, the last part of that, verse number 13, probably scares me more than anything else, because when he says that ye are the salt of the earth, and then he says if the salt has lost its savor, if we're not doing our job as Christians in being a good influence, he says that we are worthless. There's no value in Christianity anymore if we're not living it.
Right.
And so those are principles that I have striven over the years to live by.
Well, we appreciate very much your call, your insights, your years of experience. Thank you very much for calling the program tonight.
Appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good one.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Rick.
We do have another caller on the line. We're very glad to have all of these calls tonight on GBN Live. This is a live call-in program, and we encourage you to call us with your comments or questions. On the line with us now, Wes Garland, who is the gospel preacher and the co-host of one of their programs on GBN, The Shield of Faith. And we've been talking about preaching on the subjects of making good choices in our entertainment choices. Brother Garland, I understand that's your subject this coming Lord's Day, is that right?
Yes, sir, it is.
Tell us.
Yes, sir, it is.
That's great. Tell us how you've been working through this in your lesson preparation. What are some of the main thoughts you're trying to bring out in your message this Sunday?
Well, basically what I'm doing here is I'm talking about the comparison between, how we can understand the model of the church. And if we understand the church and the nature that it is, it helps us to better understand the way the home is, because the church is in the same fashion or made after the same order of the home. And so understanding all of this, the same way that in the church we are not to tolerate about sinful things, I'm really trying to bring about in relationship to the home how we ourselves cannot tolerate sinful things. And it really comes from a mindset, because, BJ, it sort of seems like to me that there's just this big mindset within the church that, we can be one way inside the church building walls, but outside of the church building walls, we can be another way. And Christianity is a 24/7, every day of the week, every minute of the day thing. And it's very, very important for us to understand that.
That's right. That's a very good observation that you've made there. Mark, as we talk with Brother Garland about these things, I'm thinking of Philippians 4 and verse 8, whatsoever things are lovely and true and of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Mark Teske, what would you say as we interact with Brother Garland here about this subject of preaching on this subject?
I think that approach is one I'm honestly very interested in, because we need to focus on things that are truly praiseworthy, things that are positive. And when we look at our entertainment choices, trying to get a little bit practical here, is this helping me in my walk with God? Is this drawing me closer? Mm-hmm. It may be neutral, or it may be pulling me away. Mm-hmm. And in, when I look at the totality of life as a Christian, that question needs to be involved in every decision I make.
Right.
That the ball game, I guess it could be something that pulls you away. It could be something that's neutral, or could cause could be a positive thing. Mm-hmm. on your walk with Christ, and part of that's an individual decision. I think but Wes's concept there that our Christianity is 24/7,
right,
and it needs to permeate every aspect of our lives. I have to agree completely. That is critical.
Brother Garland, how many years have you been preaching?
I've been preaching almost 8 years.
Okay. I'm assuming that in the time you've been preaching, you preached on matters like this before, and I'm assuming that you might have received some criticism from folks about it, claiming that you were maybe drawing lines where God didn't draw or something of that nature. How have you handled the comments, both positive and negative, that you might have received on this as you preached on it?
Well, it's just one of those things that, I've got to be a servant of Christ before I'm a servant of man. And it's one of those things we have to realize that I've got to preach the word, whether it be in the season where people like it or in the season where people don't want to hear it. But the fact of the matter is God has given us the mind or the ability to discern what's good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it really comes down to sacrificing self, going back to Luke chapter 14. Sacrificing yourself, your own desires and things of that nature. You've got to figure out which one am I going to put first, my own desires, or is it going to be the desires that God would have me to do? Because, even in my situations, my experiences, I've even had a situation where there was a group of people that were gathering outside of a person's home, and they were going to show the movie out there on the projector on the house, and they said they were going to watch a certain movie, and I went ahead and told them and warned them of the things that's in the movie, and the mother went ahead and just said this, and this being a Christian woman too, she said, well, this might not be a good movie to watch out here. And it sort of bring it into my mind that she was sort of saying, well, it's all right to watch something as long as it's not in public.
Right.
It really doesn't matter how bad it is. But we have to all realize that if a movie is bad to be seen in public, we shouldn't be watching it inside in our homes alone.
Because the Lord's everywhere we are, right?
Exactly.
Right.
In all reality, we may not be able to, or might not have to give an account to people in the physical light, but it's going to be one of those things that we're going to have to give an account to God by everything that we've ever done.
Yeah, Wes, as we consider this example here, one of the things that jumps out at me is it seems to be a statement saying, I realize that if other people see me watching this movie, it will hurt my influence.
Right.
And I'm thankful that this woman, realizes it affects her influence.
Right.
But at the same time, that lack of consistency, if people see me, it's a problem. If people don't see me, I can get away with it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I even know of a family who has little children, and they watch some bad movies that I know of, and bad TV shows and things that got a lot of cursing and things like that in it. But the way that they justify themselves doing this is whenever a word is said, they tell the children, we don't say that. And it's one of those situations where I'm saying, okay, just like what Rick said just a little bit earlier, how he said there that whenever you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. Everything that we allow to put into our minds is going to affect us somehow, some way.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to realize, there in Matthew chapter 6, verses 22 and 23, the lamp of the body is the eye, and if therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is evil or bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. Just understanding that we are in control to an extent of what we put into our minds.
And the eyes, I'm glad you mentioned that. The eyes are a gateway to the mind, right?
Exactly.
And that's why Job said he'd made a covenant with his eyes, that he wouldn't seek or look upon a maid to lust after her. And I think about the statement in Psalm 101, verse 3, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Those passages certainly resonate with us, don't they?
But yes, they do. But I want to mention this one thing just real quick.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes, right now, it's really kind of hard to find clean video games anymore. And I was over there at Walmart, and I don't know if the person who was the salesman was actually a Christian or not, but what he said stuck with me. I was telling him how hard it is to find clean games and things of that nature, and he told me, he's really very conscientious about what games his children play. And he says the way that I look at it is if the world itself rates these games like this,
right,
then what should a Christian mind be thinking about this?
That's true.
And that was a really important point that really stuck with me.
Because these people
And,
have no religious axe to grind. They're just being
Exactly.
realistic about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
Well, Brother Garland, we are glad you're preaching on this. Glad you have preached on it. Appreciate your desire to promote the truth on this. We have another caller on the line, so we'll have to let you go. But we do appreciate your comments tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Bye-bye.
Yes, sir. Matt, before we take this call, let me ask you this. You work with young people, and I know that young people desire entertainment, and that's not, as we've already noted, inherently wrong. What are some of the challenges that you faced as it relates to talking with young people and setting standards for them? Is that an easy thing to do necessarily when you're leading young people, or is it sometimes one of those things where you're kind of looked upon as an old fuddy-duddy that just doesn't want to have any fun? Talk about your experience in leading young people when it comes to entertainment.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up, and it's interesting because working with young people, most of the time when you take a young person like this, they want to do right. If you give them and you say, hey, look, we're going to go and we're going to do evangelism work, who are you going to get most of the time? You're going to get a lot of young people. Mm-hmm. They want to do right things. We've got young people that they're at school, they're talking to their friends about the gospel. Mm-hmm. They're evangelistic. They're great kids. They make poor choices when it comes to entertainment. And the thing is, they're not prepared to make the right decision when it comes to entertainment all the time. They're young. Mm-hmm. They want to experiment. They want to see this. And what it comes down to is, and I think it's interesting because we were talking with Wes about making good decisions in the home, I think the key to young people making correct choices, yes, they're responsible, they should read their Bibles and they should make biblical choices, but the key is to remember where the buck stops.
They learn from the home, don't they?
The buck stops with, and not every home has a father, but a home that has a father, that father is a leader of that home, and he ought to be setting parameters, setting standards, and moreover, a lot of times, I preached recently on entertainment choices, and I had a parent come to me and say, well, we didn't mean for our child to watch these things. And I think that can be an honest situation. So another thought process there is, not only do I have the responsibility to instruct my child in proper entertainment choices, I have the responsibility to keep up with what they're doing.
Right.
And that can be, I've got little ones, I don't even know half of it yet, but I imagine that can be very difficult, especially in the modern age. Young people get off on this not at the movies. They get off on the wrong track on YouTube, on Vine, on Reddit, on all these different things that they've got right there on their phone before they ever get to the movie theater.
And a lot of their parents are not necessarily savvy when it comes to knowing about what's available out there. And
you can get as much filth on those things as you can at the movie theater.
Absolutely. We have another caller on the line. We're very glad to have him. Cedric from Montgomery, Alabama. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to everybody.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What's your comment tonight?
I had a question. I was wondering, is it unscriptural? Because a lot of times I like to watch documentaries on certain subjects that I know may present some type of sinful behavior, whether it be people on there selling drugs or people on there participating in gang activity. But I'm watching it for the purpose of knowledge, so that I can, if I ever have an opportunity to teach the gospel to them, I can know more about them from their point of view. And I just want to hear from you guys, because I admire you guys. I watch the show a lot. I just want to hear your take on this question.
Okay, very good question. Mark?
And I appreciate the question very much, Cedric. And as we look at this, we talked about some individual differences. And in a situation like this, it would be nice if we could say black and white, this is right, this is wrong. But there's a lot of areas that require judgment. And I think Cedric brings up an excellent point. What's his motivation for watching this? Why is he doing this? And this is a case in point. Does this help bring him closer to God?
Right.
Absolutely. That he's using this entertainment and trying to understand and how can I reach people with the gospel? And I'm not saying that you can justify everything in life that way.
Right.
But this is an area that requires judgment. And here we have his motive very much seeking to try and save somebody else.
Right.
And that, I think, really needs to be taken into consideration.
And not everything that comes over the television airwaves is designed to be entertaining. Even, frankly, Gospel Broadcasting Network, though I enjoy watching it, I don't turn it on necessarily for entertainment and amusement. I want to be educated, and if I'm watching Cedric, I think you might be talking about, for example, something on the Holocaust. Someone said that if we don't learn the sins or mistakes of the past, we're doomed to repeat them. And I think we have to be informed to some level and degree educationally about things. That we have to draw the line. Some people would say, yeah, we need to be against pornography, so we need to watch it to be educated about it. That's going too far and crossing the line. And next Thursday's program is actually going to address the subject of pornography. But I understand you, Cedric, to be saying that if you're watching a show about how a cartel is brought down by the police, or how the drug market is taking over our culture, and how meth is destroying people's lives and things of that nature, that you might be able to talk to someone who's having those issues and say, look, I saw something the other night that showed how this person just went downhill so fast. I don't want you to do the same thing. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Yes, sir, exactly. I just want to be able to see things from their point of view, so that when I'm talking to them, I can already have like a general idea of the way they see the world and the way they operate.
Yes, sir. Well, we appreciate that very much. I know that it's a hard thing to reach people in the world sometimes today, because they're so bombarded with the ways of the world. And though we don't want to become, as someone said, there's a difference between the boat being in the water and the water being in the boat. We have to be in the world, but we don't let the world start coming into us and changing us.
I'd like to say something,
yes,
Cedric,
Matt.
just quickly. You mentioned that, and it makes me think about something. A day before yesterday, one of the preacher students and I were on our way to get something from a store, and we saw a guy on the side of the road, and in the middle of the road, and he had run out of gas. And so we were going to push him to the gas station. And this kind of lines up with what you're saying, Cedric, except in the application of it. Despite my large build and my huge muscles,
right.
They wanted me to be the guy steering the car, and they pushed. And but here's the thing. I got in the car to steer us into the gas station, and he had just filthy music playing. Now, I will say I stopped long enough while I'm trying to steer this car backwards down the road with no power to try to turn it down, turn it off. Nothing I did would do. I don't know how that thing worked, but nothing I did would turn that off. And my thought process hit me. What's the right thing to do here? Is it to slam on his brakes and jump out of his car and say, "Hey, look, man, I'm not helping you because there's foul." This is a non-Christian. This is a guy who needs the gospel. Mm-hmm. And you know what I did? I tried to sing a gospel song. I did. I sang a gospel song over it, and went ahead and steered his car back. And it comes back again to what you guys have said. What am I focusing on? Are you watching something to learn how to deal with people in the world? Well, guess what? Sometimes when we deal with people in the world, they use language we would rather not hear. Mm-hmm. And we ask them not to, but it's going to come. And we might hear some music we don't want to hear. Right. So I think that's a realistic, or an understandable thing to do, Cedric, in my opinion, and it's admirable that you want to do that.
Cedric, thank you so much for your call. We appreciate it very much. And we've talked about the movies, and that's one form of entertainment. Mm-hmm. Let's squeeze in some more discussion here in the last 10 minutes that we have. Let's talk about, for example, I remember, and I do enjoy listening to Michael Bublé singing certain songs. So years ago, I thought I'd surprise my wife and I'd take her to his concert. Well, I did not know before I went what kind of foul mouth he would have during his concert, and vowed that no matter how much I liked his music, I just wouldn't be going back because I've come to understand that this has been a consistent thing on his part, which I did not know then. What about going to a casino to listen to your favorite singer, or to engage in some activity that's going on? Are there choices beyond the movies that Christians have to think about when it comes to things like this?
And to be honest with you, as Wes Garland brought up when we had him on the line, that we need to look at our whole life. and the movie's obviously part of it. And again, when we think of maybe going to a concert at a casino, we have to look at our influence. You know, is this going to affect somebody else? Am I not able to reach out to somebody? And that's plays an important role. You know, Jesus said in Matthew 5:29, you know, that if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. Not literally pluck it out, but relieve that and remove that obstacle to yourself. Likewise, things that we do, we talked about the eating of meats. If that causes somebody else to stumble, my brother to stumble, for whom Christ died, absolutely I'm going to abstain from that. So, you know, we need to look at the effect it has on me, the effect it has on others. You know, I'd be hard pressed to draw, you know,
well, you know, it's
set rules on these things.
Entertainment. You mentioned this some years ago. We were at a New Year's Eve party at the church building, and some of us young people were playing cards, but not gambling, obviously. But one sister in the church referred to what we were doing as using the devil's pasteboards, was her words. And I was upset as a teenager because we were asked to put them away. Now, she left later on, and we were able to do it again. My dad explained to me later that there was no need for us to be an unnecessary stumbling block to her if that was a bother to her. So sometimes things that are technically permissible, you don't do because of the desire not to be a bad influence or a stumbling block. And people might argue, well, she just needs to get over it, and I understand things of that nature, but that's what she'd been ingrained and taught from the time that she was just small, is that you don't play cards. Well, I think she might have missed the fact that you could play cards without gambling, and that doesn't mean you can't play rook or something of that nature, or some game that you enjoy. But when it comes to entertainment, there are lots of different factors in this, and video games were mentioned. And by the way, let me just say, as our time is running out here, you might still be able to squeeze in a call to us, and we'd love to have you if you want to call us at 662-874-5508, 662-874-5508. We'd love to have you call. There's still time. Matt, let's talk about video games. A lot of young people are into that. Not inherently wrong to play a video game. What are some factors that people need to consider, though, about it?
Well, I'm a big fan of a thing called TED Talks, where they have these various experts in different realms talk. And one TED Talk I heard was on video games. And this lady took the 5 top things that people on their deathbeds that they said they wish they'd done more of. And she was able, now she's a video game developer, mind you, but she was able to connect 4 of them to things that video games would fulfill in a person's life. And there's studies that show that, you know, that young people especially stay connected socially with people that they otherwise would not have through video games. So certainly there's some good that can come from video games. I'm a person who comes from a background of, I had a time period in my life where I abused a video game. I played it way too much. I mean, it was like it was my job.
Yeah.
That's unhealthy.
Right.
And if a young person's doing that, the best advice I can give you is, wherever that game is in your house right now, go find it and break the disc. And so, you know, that's what's, when it comes to video games, it's not just what's in the video game, it's also the amount of time. But then you got to consider what's in the video game, and remember, there are wholesome games out there that you can play with people. Play those in moderation. If it's not wholesome, hey, turn it off. It's not worth costing me my soul because I wanted to spend some time staring at a TV hitting buttons.
Right. And I know that young people today can socially interact through this means, and yet at the same time, there are some ways that we can become, as Matt has so clearly pointed out, so wrapped up in it that it becomes dominant in our lives. And it's not either or. It's not either you do or you don't. Mark and I come from the Pong generation where one little blip came across the screen, and we thought that was the coolest thing ever. You remember video games in ancient times?
Oh, that was the cat's meow in the day.
Right.
And one thing that brings up an excellent point is so oftentimes that we categorize and we talk about the movies, you know, and Gone with the Wind, that line that you mentioned, I mean, that was scandalous at the time.
Right.
And as the years gone by, I mean, today that's considered mild. A study was done several years ago comparing the amount of poor language in primetime television. And between the years of 2005 and 2010, there was a 69% increase in foul language on primetime television. So these things are kind of getting worse and worse. And video games, again, were nothing back in the day, but now there's some that are really adults only, that things really have moved, and sometimes more toward the graphic, the profane, and the evil in some aspects to it.
Right. One of our viewers has sent in a question, and we always appreciate those questions as well. Leonard from Memphis wants to know about taking a vacation to the beach. What can we do or not do? Should we or shouldn't we? That's a form of entertainment, Matt, is going to the beach. Is that something that a Christian can include in his entertainment repertoire? If so, what are some guidelines?
Well, and I think we've been hitting on this the entire time. The key when we're asking these questions is, what are we trying to do? We're trying to avoid sin, yes, and we're trying to further the cause of Christ. Now, the big question, it's easy to make rules for ourselves, and we should, but we have to remember those aren't laws that we can impose on other people. If I sit down and look at anything, going to the beach for instance, and make a God-first choice, is this entertainment that I can engage in and please God, then do it. If you've got a place where you're going to be privately on the beach and no one's going to be around you, if you go, I know my family goes to the beach a lot of times in the winter when it's very cold outside, and the only thing you could do is wrap up in a jacket and walk on the beach. So to say it's simple to go to the beach would be foolish.
Right.
On the other hand, is there wisdom that needs to take place there? Absolutely. And as long as you're making that choice according to scriptures, then that's the key here. God first, and then also that I don't sin, but also how am I affecting others for the cause of Christ?
I remember holding a gospel meeting some years ago in the hotel they put us at, just happened to be on the beach near Pacifica, California, and it was gorgeous. It was March of the year. We were able to get out there without having to see people unclad, and we were able to enjoy God's creation. And so there are certain times and places where you have some privacy or people aren't disrobing when you can enjoy those kinds of things. And as Matt said, those would have to be factored in. Mark, some final thoughts about tonight.
I think one of the big things I would like to kind of wrap up and think about is this subject of looking at everything that we do in our life. Our entertainment, no matter what we do, it needs to be consistent. And as we try to get practical with that, considering if my preacher was right here, if my elders were right here, would I be doing this? Would I be engaging in this? If somebody I was studying with was there watching me do this, would I engage in it? And if the answer to that is no, then I should refrain.
Right. Of course, our ultimate role model, as we all believe on this panel, is Jesus Christ. And the Bible says in 1 John 2:6 that we ought to walk even as he walked. The Bible says in 1 Peter 2 and verse 21, hereunto were you called, because Christ also left an example for us that we should follow in his steps. And if I wouldn't take Christ to a certain movie that I'm going to, because I would be ashamed for him to be there watching it with me, then I shouldn't be there. If I wouldn't take Christ to a certain location, then I shouldn't go either. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bible is our ultimate guide when it comes to all matters pertaining to life and godliness. 2 Peter 1:3, we trust you'll always let it speak to you and it alone. And join us again next week for GBN Live. Thank you.